Hey everybody, it's Beej with Lambda School. Today we'll be setting up and installing Django. So the objective today is to figure out how to get the environment set up with Python and Django. And we're going to do that in what's called a virtual environment. So we'll set that up, we'll install Django within it, we'll start a project, and then we'll start an app within that Django project. And at that point we can test the server. After that we'll do something with what's called migrations, but we should have a working test install at that point. So the first thing we're going to do is install our virtual environment. So for the virtual environment, what this means is that we're going to set up a space for our Django demo project where we can install things and not have them interfere with other installs. So different projects that you set up might require different versions of Django or different versions of various libraries. And by setting up a virtual environment, this allows us to have libraries of certain versions set aside for one project and libraries of other versions set aside for other projects, as opposed to installing those libraries globally, which would mean all projects would have to use the same version of those libraries. So first, we're going to set up the virtual environment using a tool called pipenv, and you can see if you have it installed by running pipenv ---- version. If it tells you anything other than command not found, then we're in good shape. We also should have Python 3 installed. So if you type Python ---- version, or if you type Python 3 ---- version, one of those should give you a version 3. So on Macs, version 2 is installed by default, but I've installed version 3 already. So get pipenv and version 3 of Python installed. And then what we're going to do is set up that virtual environment with pipenv. And we're going to tell it that we want a virtual environment set up where Python is Python version 3. So we're going to do this, and it's going to create this virtual environment. It's going to tell us where this is located as well on disk. It's out of our home directory and .local share virtual envs and this directory. We don't normally need to know that, but if we need to go in and delete this later, then we can do it. This is where all our libraries and things are going to get installed. So once we've done that, we can see that there's a pip file and a pip file lock there. And if we want to peek in there, we can have a look. The pip file kind of says what is installed here. We see that it requires Python version 3.6, and the pip file lock is the same as the pip file with more detailed information for recreating this environment if it is cloned later. So pipfile.lock should be checked into source control, as should pipfile. So this is telling us exactly what version of what we need. Normally you don't have to look in here. You just interface with these through the pipenv command. Notably, after you clone a repo that has a pip file in it, you're going to want to run pipenv install in order to install all the dependencies that are listed in the pip file lock. Right now there aren't any, so it didn't install anything. But it's telling us to activate the project's virtual environment, run the following: pipenv shell. So we've set up the virtual environment, but we're not in it right now. So we have to step into the virtual environment. And once we're in it, everything we install is installed in this virtual environment only. So I'm going to launch the virtual environment with pipenv shell, and we know we're in it because your prompt will change, at least on Mac and Unix. The prompt will change to show you that you are within this virtual environment here. And so now things that we install get installed in this environment only. So I'm going to do a pipenv install Django to install the Django libraries within this virtual environment now that I'm in here. So this is going to chug along for a little bit. As it's installing, it's also going to change our pip file and our pip file lock. If we have a look at the pip file now, we see that it requires Django version anything. We could be more specific about that, but in this case, we're just using version whatever of Django. And now that it's installed, we can use some Django command line tools. Now we want to start a project. The project is sort of an umbrella that holds a number of apps within the project. So we'll have one project, and inside the project there can be many apps. In our example, we'll just have one app. but there can be many apps within the project that talk to one another or are more standalone. So the first thing we need to do is start the project to hold all the apps. And we do that with the Django admin tool and the start project command. And now we need to give it a project name. And I'm going to call this project Django because it's a clever name that we've historically used. And then since we're already in the subdirectory that the project is in, that the app is in, that our entire code base is in, I'm going to say start the project from within the current directory. If you don't do this, it'll make a new subdirectory out of here to install everything in. By default, start project assumes that you haven't created a directory structure yet. But since we have already created this directory structure, this Django demo directory structure, I'm going to say go ahead and use that. So go ahead and make the new Django project Django within the current directory. So that'll set that up. And now if I have a look, I see that I've got a Django directory. And I also have this new thing called manage.py. We're going to use that a lot upcoming. We can have a look in Django. And we see we've got some stuff, init.py, settings, URLs, WSGI. So it's set up some stuff for us. We'll have a look at those things later. So now we have the project. We need to make an app within the project. And so we're going to make a notes app. And so I'm going to run Django admin again, start app, and say notes. In this case, we don't have to say in the current directory because start app just uses the current project, which is Django. So we'll start that thing up. And now we have a notes directory also created. And if we have a peek in there, we see we've got apps and migrations and models and tests, all kinds of stuff that it's built for us. And later on, we'll go and modify some of these files to change how the server works. All right. Now we've actually gotten a position where we can run the web server and see the result. I'm going to use that manage.py program that was installed in the root directory of our project. Some of you might have to say Python manage.py to run it. If you're on Unix, you can probably just say /manage.py. And then we're going to give it an option run server. And we're going to see what it says. All right, performing system checks. System checked identified no issues. You have 15 unapplied migrations. Your project may not work properly until you apply the migrations, whatever that means. We'll get back to that in a second. Meanwhile, it says that it started the development server at this URL, localhost port 8000. Quit the server with Control-C. So if I pop over to my web browser and hit reload here because I've already got the URL, localhost port 8000. Hey, we get this little test screen that says, congratulations, you have installed this. So this is the screen that comes up by default if we have debug set to true in our settings and we haven't defined any more endpoints on our server, which we haven't. So this gives us the basic install. So that's a good step. As a challenge, you should make another project from scratch and solidify this process in your mind. The more repetition you have, the better at it you'll be. And as always, thanks for watching this video.